start. So, first of all, welcome everybody to our second webinar in our series of how do we deal with the pandemic. If you remember the first webinar, we took a look specifically at home working. And this time we're going to take a look at an area that many of you have flagged up to us as being crucial, which is well-being. I'm Lynda Gratton. I'm the Professor of Management Practice at the London Business School, but also, of course, founder and CEO of the Hotspots Movement, HSM, which I've been running for over a decade. And of course, I'm joined on the line here with our wonderful co-heads, Emma and Harriet, and Dr. Anna Gurin, who is our head of research. And in fact, it's Anna who will be talking to me later on when we move into the question time position at 10:15. So this is part of a series. This is really what a learning group. We're absolutely thrilled that you are part of this learning group. You can download the webinar at the end of this. We'll send you a note that will have the webinar to download. The one that I did at London Business School on virtual working has now been downloaded 10,000 times. So people are obviously really interested in this. So please do feel free to share the link. These are crucial topics right now. We're also going to send you this afternoon a summary of today's presentation and indeed of the key aspects from last time. And most importantly, I think you remember last time we spoke, I said that we were building a survey to really help us and you understand what's happening right now. That survey is now complete, and we'll also send you the link. So if you're interested in what's happening in these key issues like well-being, like collaboration, like productivity, innovation, and most importantly, what your leaders are doing, please fill in the survey, and you'll have an opportunity in the next day or two to talk to one of my colleagues about that. So we have a whole day of activity ahead of us. So let's start right now. Well, first of all, let me just remind you that this is part of a series. You can see already that we've added to that series. We've already done virtual working and families. I wrote a column for Sloan Management Review, MIT, on that. That was out on the 6th of April. We have another one coming out next week. Today is about virtual working and well-being. Next week, week after next, 7th of May, we're looking at collaboration and productivity, because our view is that by then, your concerns are going to really be about that. Your concerns are going to be about how do I ensure that we're being productive, we're being collaborative. So that's Thursday, the 7th of May. Put it in your diary now. And then we take a look at leadership on the 21st of May. Please do fill in the survey and encourage as many people as you can to do that, because there's a whole section in the survey about leadership. And we'd love to know what's happening on leadership. So the 21st of May, we'll be looking at leadership. And then on the 4th of June, we're going to talk about the new normal, whatever that might be. And I expect by the 4th of June, we'll have a slightly better idea of what the new normal is. Now, let me start by saying a little bit more about what we're thinking about when it comes to well-being. Well, first thing to say is that well-being has been part of our research focus at the Future of Work for some time now. And a year or so ago, we opened our collaborative platform to our Future of Work members. Some of you, of course, are members. Great to see you here today. To ask the simple question, what does well-being mean to you? And as you can see, each of us thinks about well-being in different ways. So we analyzed the thousands of comments that you made about well-being, and we concluded that there were 8 major facets that seem to be crucial when you think about well-being. And as you can see, they are, feeling energetic, physical health. I know that's been a big issue for many of us. mental health, real issue right now, having rewarding social connections, financial health, psychological safety, achieving a spiritual satisfaction, and being emotionally resilient. So we'd sort of already learned that these things were important. Now, let's just take a look at another aspect of this, which is that we're all different. And I think that when I write up what I've learned from this pandemic, one of the things that I've really understood is that we really are all different. And actually, people's responses during the pandemic have been highly individualistic. You know, it depends on our age, it depends on our caring responsibilities. As you know, last time we spoke, I looked at families with children to look after, really having a very tricky time at the moment. It's about our stage of life. It's about our personal preferences. One of the things that I'm going to speak about in a moment is how we manage boundaries. Well, some of us individually prefer to have very clear boundaries between our work and our life, and some of us like to meld the two. It's a personality characteristic. So, you know, when we think about well-being, let me make 3 points. I've already made 2 of them. Number 1, it's multifaceted. Number 2, it's very much about the individual and where they are in their life. Number 3, it has responsibility both to the individual and to the organization. And I want really to really put that in your mind now at the beginning of this webinar, because I'm going to suggest that we as individuals, and that means you and also your employees, need to take personal responsibility for their well-being. And I'm going to share with you today some tactics that allow them to do that, allow us to do that. There are tactics that we can take now to increase our well-being. Having said that, there's also things that you can do from an organizational perspective, you know, in terms of management, norms and values, in terms of communication strategies, in terms of practices and processes that will also make a difference. So today we're going to focus on both individual tactics, but also importantly on what organizations could be doing. Now, where are we now? Well, no surprise at all to know that this is a bad time for well-being. This is a bad time for well-being. And you've seen that in the papers you read. This is data from the UK, but I know that many of you who are dialing in from other countries would say exactly the same, that we're worried, we're more worried than we've ever been. I must say, where are we now? Day 41. Those of you who know I keep a diary, here's my day 41 diary. Thursday, 23rd of April. So this is now getting tough, isn't it? Maybe some of you have been longer in isolation now for 41 days. People are sleeping less. We're more anxious. Some of us have lost our jobs, or certainly, as we have done, had our pay or hours reduced. And many of us are feeling lonely. So, you know, well-being has always been on your agenda. We know that. But what really is very obvious now is it's moving to the top of your agenda. So we've got a couple of polls to begin with, just to get us a sense of where you're coming from. So this is about you. So which of the 8 well-being elements are you most concerned about for yourself? We're going to ask you about employees in a moment, but this is you. Is it feeling energetic, being physically healthy, experiencing positive mental health, social connections, financial health, psychological safety, spiritual satisfaction, emotional resilience? Which is the one that you're most concerned about? If you could fill that poll in now, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so let's get those polls completed. And as soon as they're completed, Callie will show us what that is telling us. So please submit your answers, and then we'll take a look at what you believe is most concerning for you right now. So, there you go. Psychology, academics hate this, as you know. Basically, well, I suppose this simply reinforces the point we made earlier, which is that it's very individualistic. So, number one, physical health. We're sitting here, aren't we? In my case, on a beautiful Japanese chair. Emotional resilience. So number one, physical health. Number two, mental health. Number three, emotional resilience. Number four, social connections. And then we're going down to being sufficiently energetic. Psychological safety is not an issue for us. Spiritual satisfaction, similarly not. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the second poll, which is not so much about you, but about your employees. And we're asking this question because, of course, their experiences are not going to be the same as yours. If you use the survey, as I hope you will with your employees, you'll get a much clearer idea from them of what they believe is most important to them, what they're most concerned about. So the second poll isn't about you, it's about your employees. What do you think they are most concerned about? And it might well be that you know the answer to that already because you've already surveyed them or you've had focus groups with them. So let's get those polls done. And once we've done that, we'll take a look in a bit more detail about some of these elements. So I'm going to drink my coffee with Bodicea. Okay, so your worry when it comes to your employees is about, we thought probably financial health would come up. And I know that some of you on the webinar today have employees who are on relatively low pay. Many of them have been furloughed. I know that that's a worry for you, their financial health, but actually positive mental health is coming up as the thing that you're most concerned about. So when you think about your employees, that's the area that you're really worried about. Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's move on. And I'm going to, we obviously can't look at all 8 of those. So the 3 that we've picked out, which I think will address some of the challenges that you've identified, are emotional resilience, social connections, and feeling energetic. Which together, of course, are emotional and mental health issues. So I think that in the next 20 minutes or so, I should be able to give you some really good tips about what to do now to think about the well-being of your employees, but also to help them to really maximize their well-being during these very, very difficult periods. Let's take a look, first of all, at emotional resilience. Now, we've known from the work that we've done in the past on well-being and emotional resilience, and indeed on mental health, is that people have already struggled. They struggle to switch off from work, and they struggle to actually stand back, during time off, during holidays. And those of you in our Future of Work consortium know very well that in the conversations that we've had, that's been a big source of our conversations. And of course, the interesting thing about the pre-pandemic versus the pandemic is, in terms of the resilience of your organization, it's been very tested. And I guess what I would say about this is many of us were already, our emotional well-being was already being tested because we were finding it hard to switch off. We were struggling to use the technologies that we're now familiar with and really learning how to manage those. Well, of course, what we know now is that simply got worse. And as I described to you in our first webinar, which was about the pandemic and families working when you're working from home, is that the big insight for us about the sort of work that many of us are doing, our working conditions, is that whereas before, could somebody switch there? Thank you. Mute everyone, please, thank you. Whereas before we were managing, 3 boundaries, home to work, work to home, work to home. So that was just 2 boundaries really in effect. Most of us are now managing multiple boundaries. Now you might say, well, so what? Work, home, work, home, work, home. Why is that difficult? Well, we know, and research is very clear about this, that every single transition in a boundary is extremely emotionally depleting. And the way that we've managed that in general is we've built all sorts of transitional practices to help us stop depleting our energy and our emotion. But of course, those have now all gone. We don't walk to our office anymore. We don't have a coffee with our friends. We don't put our suit on, although as you can see, I have my suit on today. So this was a transitional object that I'm wearing. And we're operating across multiple boundaries. We asked on the 9th of April, when we polled you on the 9th of April, we asked you about that. And everybody pretty much said, yeah, I mean, I'm operating across multiple boundaries. And when we had the chat afterwards, you said things like, when we talk to people, they say they're exhausted. They find it impossible to sort of step away from the home boundaries. These are very, very difficult things to do. So this is our first set of tactics. And by the way, these come from well-researched evidence of how you manage your resilience, emotional resilience during this time. I call these tactics because they're things that individuals can do. And if you look at people who are good at managing their emotional resilience, this is what they do. So this is good practice that we can all learn from. And basically what you're seeing here is they're managing 3 sorts of boundaries. They're managing their behavioral boundary, i.e. how they behave from one situation to another. They're managing their physical boundaries, for example, having a separate office or somewhere that's discreet. And they're managing their temporal boundaries, i.e. the time that they're allocating. And just take a look at these 6 ways, 6 tactics that we know will make a difference. First, leveraging technology. I think in our next webinar on collaboration, we're going to talk a lot more about technology, because I know a number of you are very fatigued by the whole Zoom experience. Here I am sitting in an animated way talking to a computer. That's not easy. And I know a number of you have said how much that is really depleting you emotionally to always be on never to be on receive. I can't see anybody. So that's depleting. So how do you use technology? Making clear your preferences about when you want to have conversations and when you don't. Setting out blocks of time seems to be absolutely crucial. Emphasizing physical boundaries and taking regular breaks. Now, my guess is that many of your employees are sort of moving slowly towards these tactics, but actually these are tactics you need to share with them as fast as possible, because they'll make a difference to their emotional resilience. So let's take a look now at the second element, which is rewarding connections. And what do we know about that? Well, on the LBS pandemic webinar that I ran on the 18th of March, about 3,000 people came into that webinar, and we polled them and asked, what's your experience right now? Now, the reason I've put the date there is that, people's experiences is changing over time. And part of my interest as an academic is just to see how our experiences are changing. But right then, at that point in time, when we asked them, you know, what's the thing that most describes your experience? 46% said, I miss the interaction with the office. And of course, you know, it depends a lot on our own personal circumstances, but that's going to be a real issue. So we need to, in terms of mental health and well-being, we need to address issues of isolation, of social isolation, as fast as possible, because, you know, this is going to be an issue that will continue. And as we know, in terms of where we're going with social isolation, the end is, I'm afraid, not in sight. So it's absolutely crucial that we continue to build mechanisms to connect people who are feeling lonely and isolated. Now, how might we think about that? Well, you know, one way to think about this issue of loneliness and social connectivity is to use network theory. And those of you who know our work at HSM and as part of the Future of Work Consortium know that network theories for us have been a very useful insight into what's happening in organizations. And those of you who have remembered Lynda Gratton, my colleague from London Business School, her work on networks shows that emotions are very contagious. So what we mean by that is that the connections that you have are where you get quite a lot of your emotional resilience, or indeed emotional depletion. Now, the point here is that in general, we've found ways with our social connections to manage our mental health and manage our well-being. And all of us, pre-pandemic, had a whole set of ways that we managed our social connectivity, managed this contagion, you know, so that we stayed strong and healthy. You know, one of the things that Raina would say is, for example, you know, if you've got friends who are very negative and deplete your energy, get rid of them. Don't spend time with them. Now, I know that sounds pretty harsh, but she's speaking as a network theorist there, not as your best friend. But nevertheless, the point is this, that each of us have found strategies to manage our well-being and manage our networks. And much of that is physical, you know, just putting your arms around your kids. I can't do that now. Gosh, it makes me feel teary just to say it. As you know, one of my sons works on A&E as a doctor. I can't put my hands around him. I can't get anywhere near him. And so all the things that we can't hold our grandchildren. So all the ways that we normally, you know, have our social connectivity and the way that we manage our emotions, those have all disappeared. And in their place have come some pretty tough things. One is that we're now making our emotional support is now through digital social networks. And as we're finding, we'll come back in our next webinar and talk more about that. But as we're finding, being on Zoom in a house party is not the same as being at a party. And many of us are suffering from fatigue. Zoom is not the same. And so the social connectivity is beginning to break down. And also we're now very reliant on our home environments for our social connections. And that means, you know, that we're spending a great deal more time with our children that are at home than we would normally do, much less time with our friends. And so the whole network that we built that supported our well-being has now gone. And in its place has come something which is very different. And digital social networks, as we know, can be, in terms of contagion, can be extremely negative. I can see lots of people asking questions. Please continue to ask your questions. At about 10:15, we'll open up to questions. Dr. Anna Gurin will be moderating that. So please, I just noticed a whole load of questions coming up. So we are very much, the way that we normally manage the contagion of emotion has now disappeared. And in its place is something rather odd. These digital social networks, which, as we know, can be incredibly negative and very shaming to us. And we, you know, those of you with teenage kids know the impact that social networks having on them, but also an enormous emphasis on our home environment, which was probably only part of the way we kept ourselves healthy and our well-being. So, you know, we think that you can play a role right now in terms of social connections. And here's 4 quick win ideas. Today is very much about quick win ideas. 1, if you haven't already done it, then schedule time where people can just relax and have a coffee, you know, like we're doing here. Number 2, make guidelines to encourage managers to work. I do think, you know, my son who's on A&E is training to be a surgeon, and I think I've said to a number of you that I've been incredibly impressed with the way that surgical teams have protocols they go through. I mean, they're very simple things, you know, like, you know, step 1, make sure that everybody's in the room. Step 2, work out where the organ is. But actually, research had showed that these protocols were incredibly important to the outcome of surgery. And you need to do the same right now. I mean, these are very complex circumstances. Some people are doing good practice, others aren't. And you need now, if you haven't already done so, and of course, we're happy to help you on that, build protocols so that managers know how to support employees with regard to social connections, and also to help employees build the right tactics. Listen to people and help them tap into communities. Those of you who follow us at HSM know we are very, very, we think the benefits of communities are enormous. As some of you know, we have our own platform that allows thousands of people to talk to each other. In fact, we're launching one in the next day or 2 for a telecoms company where we have 96,000 people talking to each other about how they can really leverage the insights from this pandemic period and how they can really pull themselves into a stronger resilience. We need all to be doing that. We need to find ways to link people into their communities so that they can share good ideas, and also so that they feel as if they've got somebody to talk to. You know, I've got colleagues at London Business School with small children at home. I'm here with my husband and my elder son who's had to rush back from New York. We're not the same, and it's hard for me to I mean, I can understand, but deep empathy I don't have. They need to spend time with other families with small children, and your organization can be a connectivity around that to connect people to their existing communities so they can pull together in positive ways. Okay, let's move on now to the 3rd element, which is around feeling sufficiently energetic. And quite a number of you, I can see in the initial poll, said that this was an issue for you, either in terms of your physical energy or in terms of your sort of energy levels. And I think day 41, which of us isn't suffering from depleting energy? So let's just take a look at that. And one of the ways we like to think about it, just as an analogy, is to think about it as a battery. So think about yourself and your employees as batteries. And of course, there are some activities that recharge. There's the battery being recharged. There are some activities and experiences that maintain the energy. But of course, as you can see, there are also activities that deplete deplete your energy level. And you have to be sure that as you think about the well-being of yourself and of your employees, you manage those 3 things very, very carefully. Because what we know is that in terms of mental health, and some of you are very worried about the mental health of your employees, and you've said that in the 2nd poll, in terms of mental health, emotional resilience is crucial, of course, Social connections are crucial, of course, but energy, feeling energetic is also absolutely crucial for mental health and well-being. Now, what do we know about those three energy states? Number one, we know that being always on is depleting. Now, I know it's a surprise to some people, but I am an introvert. Most academics are. So for me, to be on all the time in Zoom meetings, to be looking at myself all the time is very, very depleting. And you have to really understand what's depleting you, but also what's depleting your employees. Secondly, recovery is absolutely crucial. So what we've learned, for example, in terms of stress, is most people can handle high levels of stress. But here's the insight: they can't handle it all the time. They need periods to recover. My worry, frankly, is on day 41, and it could well be much longer for you, recovery energy is going to be absolutely crucial. So you need to be keeping an eye on the energy level of your own energy level, the energy level of your employees, so that you're able to really understand when to step in and say, now is the time to rest and renew. Because right now, it's like Groundhog Days, isn't it? Every day is the same. Every Saturday, every Sunday, every Monday, every Tuesday. And if you're not careful, what you'll be doing is over time significantly depleting the energy and therefore the mental health of your people. So knowing what to do in terms of rest and renewal is going to be absolutely crucial. And finally, you know, once you have energy, it's really important to be able to manage it. And again, research gives us real insights into managing energy. And what we know is the most important thing to manage your energy is that you have autonomy at work and that you're trusted to exercise autonomy. Now, we spoke about that in our last webinar, and we're going to talk about it in our next webinar about collaboration and productivity, and indeed the next one after that, which is about leadership. But part of the leadership role now is to trust employees to manage their own energy levels. And if you don't do that, then you're really in danger of actually, you know, making that depletion even worse than it is right now. And that's very difficult. You know, as I said earlier, there are so many ways that our energy is being depleted and therefore our mental health is being put at risk. Video conferencing is emotionally, cognitively, and physically taxing. I think we're all agreeing to that now. Social distancing measures are creating energy drainers. All those hugs that you used to have. I don't even have a dog to hug. I'm afraid that dear Bodicea passed away 2 years ago, but we still love her. So, you know, all of that hugging, that's all gone, and that's an enormous drain of energy. And we no longer have the same sources of energy. You know, I love opera. It's not the same watching it on the telly. It honestly isn't. I love walking in the country. I can't do that. So, you know, we've all had our energy. The things that normally create energy are really being depleted right now. So let me ask you the third, actually, and final poll question, which is, what do you find most challenging? This is about you, not about your employees. Managing your energy. Is it the way I have to communicate, like now, the lack of social contact, the lack of time for myself, you know, the autonomy that we have to actually, you know, in a normal life, in a normal working life, you have autonomy to create time for yourself. That seems to have disappeared, or none of the above. It might be something else completely, in which case, if it is, go into our chat room and tell us what it is. I can see there's quite a lot of chat going on right there. So which do you find most challenging to managing your own energy? So let's take a look, fill it in, and then Callie, who's sitting there with her calculator, will tell us what's going on. The lack of time for myself, isn't that interesting? That comes back to the autonomy thing and the trust thing. So, you know, again, and we'll come on to it when we talk next week, the week after next, about productivity and collaboration. We're going to have to really think hard about that. And actually, probably this blocks of time that I talked about in our last webinar, we'll have to think about that. But you can see that these are all really, really important issues. And again, do you see how we have almost equal for each three? What that again tells us, which is something I said at the beginning, is individuals are different. And I think one of the reasons we're very keen to survey employees right now, and you'll be sent the link later on today, is because if we can get tens of thousands of people to complete this, I think you'll see that there is quite a lot of difference between people. And what that means is we have to be much more thoughtful about how we develop solutions that aren't for everybody, but are rather tailored to the circumstances that people find themselves in. Okay, so what are the actions to help your people feel sufficiently energetic? These are energy management actions. I mean, first of all, talk about it. And I think, you know, the conversation that we're having now is the beginnings of that. And you'll see in our survey that there are other questions about that. The survey also has opportunities for people to fill in, you know, to write what their ideas are. So we're also going to be doing a qualitative as well as a quantitative analysis. So, you know, talk about energy. And actually one of the things that has found to be very useful is to share to-do lists in daily team meetings to sort of re-energize. And certainly at HSM, from day one, we've been doing that. We've been meeting every single morning with everybody around the world at a time that works hopefully for everyone, although Sally, who's based in Sydney, always seems to have to get up late, and Ellen, who's in New York, has to start early. But nevertheless, every morning we talk to each other and say what we're doing, and that's a sort of energizing process. And then, you know, trust people to work flexibly, and that's about trust, by the way. Please do keep those questions coming. I can see they're piling in there. Anna's analyzing them as we speak. Now, in the last 5 minutes we have before I open for questions, let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what we do now and what we might think about. This actually is something that I'm thinking and writing about at the moment. And in the next week or so, I'll have a piece out. But let me just, you know, some initial thoughts. First of all, nobody thinks it's going to be the same. And I don't think any of us have a clue what it would be. Andrew Scott, my co-author, and I have, as some of you know, a book called A New Long Life coming out on the 28th of May. And that really addresses what we think the future could be. But it's not going to be, we're not going to spring back to normal again. You know, the river has passed, for those of you who love that metaphor. And we still have a river, but it's not the same river. So what can you do right now? Well, these are some of the things I've just talked to you about. Do them right now if you haven't already. Probably there are some you've already done, but there's probably others that you're not doing. We really think you should pull people together on a platform to talk to each other. We think that the experience that we've had of running these platforms during the pandemic is they've been incredibly useful for people to connect and to talk. So these are a whole set of ideas. We'll be sending these to you later. And then, you know, 5 ways to think about the future. Because one of the things I think we've learned about this process is that if you didn't come into the pandemic resilient, then you're really suffering now as an organization. And I think one of the biggest messages from all of this is going to be about resilience, you know, financial resilience, obviously, but also emotional resilience, having a resilient skill set, and we'll be talking about that more in the next webinar. But basically, this is an opportunity for you to think about well-being as a form of resilience, as money in the bank. If you've got if you've got well-being processes in place and employees who are strong and healthy, then that's going to give you resilience for whatever comes next. And let's face it, nobody knows what's coming next. Here's 5 ideas. Number 1, think about empowerment. You know, it's very clear, and we talked about this in the last webinar, that actually people need to manage themselves, and to do that, you've got to empower them to do that, and you've got to be empathic to them. Number 2, provide tools and guides. I think if you haven't already got a playbook, you need one. We're very happy to help you build one, but you need a playbook that helps people understand what are the tactics that I can take now. Number 3, your managers, you know, that level, are really under strain at the moment. I mean, we have evidence from our last webinar that people felt it was really, you know, managers get trapped between the economic and business case of the company and the emotional and well-being case of employees. And I think that that trap is even stronger now. You know, most companies are up against it financially. They're cutting back costs, they're reducing labor, and at the same time, the people who are still with you are working incredibly hard, and it's their productivity and creativity that's going to be absolutely crucial to you. Managers are a very, very important conduit to that. So we think, you know, you really need to support managers and help them prioritize the well-being of their people. Number 4, listen, 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 listen. We think online platforms are a brilliant way of doing that, because you need to help people to listen and to communicate with each other and to respond constantly. You know, look, we've been saying for decades, haven't we, how important the agile company is. Guess what? We have one. All of us are being agile. All of us are being innovative. We're at HSM doing things that we've never done before. We've done them faster than we've ever done before. We're learning faster than we've ever done before. And capturing those experiments and listening to them and adapting to them will help you move into the next phase. And finally, empathy is going to be absolutely crucial. You know, even our own polls show how different you are. The 150 people who are on this webinar right now are different from each other. None of you agreed on any one of the questions that we asked. All of you had your own perspective. And that means that you, in terms of your communication processes, have to be extremely sensitive and empathic to the real significant differences between people. Now, 10:15, let's open for questions. And I have on the call my friend and colleague, Dr. Anna Gurin, who is Head of Research at HSM. Anna, what are you hearing?
Thanks, Lynda. So in the chat, there was an interesting discussion going on around energy, particularly in the context of annual leave. So people were saying that, as you raised, there are new energy drainers, you've got new responsibilities at home, you're caring for aging parents, you're having to homeschool a teenager now, or even worse, a 4-year-old, I imagine, which is more stressful. But also the role itself can be stressful if you're in a fast-paced customer role. And going to do this in this context, that can be an energy drainer.
Yeah. Okay.
The question of annual leave, interestingly, was one that emerged. So a few people saying that it has been challenging to get their people to take annual leave. People have been cancelling it, they don't want to take it, which might be okay in the short term because people are busy, they have a lot of work to do. But obviously in the longer term is a bad energy drainer for people to not take it. So interesting discussion around that. Some people were saying they're having to reframe what annual leave is for, in a way. because you can't really do anything with your annual leave anymore. You can't
Yeah.
do anything. So it's more around reminding people that it is important for well-being, for them to rest and recuperate. So I think that was an interesting discussion that emerged. Also, a great point from Jorge from Sage around not forgetting the good news.
Yeah.
In fact, as you mentioned at the end there, people are closer to family, they're forced to be flexible, they're forced to be adaptive. We're seeing fantastic behaviour from colleagues, from leaders, of how to respond to the changes that we're seeing, which leads me to a question around how to communicate this with your employees. You know, this is a period of great uncertainty. No one really knows what's going to happen, when this is going to finish, but you're having to, as we've said, maintain people's well-being, keep them going throughout this. So how do you balance that, making sure they know the good news, but also making sure that they know they might be in this for the long haul and they need to look after their well-being? So what are your thoughts in terms of balancing the two when it comes to communicating with your employees?
Well, thank you, Anna. I mean, those are, and just sort of let me go on to just what we're doing next, just to give you sort of an idea of that before I answer the question specifically. You know, look, we're going to talk about leadership in May. And I think, I don't know about your experience, but certainly my experience talking to leaders is they're as exhausted as everyone. You know, leaders generally have a whole set of boundaries around them. Those have all disappeared. I spoke to one CEO a couple of weeks ago and she said, I'm on a Zoom meeting all the time and I don't see any of my employees. It's very, very draining. So helping your leaders to support them, their own well-being is actually going to be crucial for you, because the leaders are going to be the ones that take you through. In the COVID pulse check that we've got, that you can link into now, we ask a whole set of questions about people's experiences of leadership. Let me just deal with that question first. I think that, you know, one of the really important issues is, how does a leader show empathy now? And that, of course, we know that people show empathy by sharing their own stories, by listening to other people, and that's why these platforms can be so brilliant. If you haven't done a survey, please do use our survey, because that will also provide an opportunity for leaders to understand more about what's happening in your organization. So empathy, listening is going to be important. But I think, Jorge, you're right about the future, which is to say, people are looking to leaders to help them understand the future. Now, the simple truth is that the future is unknowable. You know, those of you who know my work know I love scenario planning. And this is a good time to think about scenarios, but actually the future is unknowable. But people do want a sense that your leaders have an idea about what the future is and are doing as much as possible to secure that future. So the leadership role now is extremely difficult, because they are both managing their own energy, which is being highly depleted. Secondly, they want to show empathy and listen. But thirdly, your employees are expecting them to have a vision of the future. And I think that the more they're able to communicate that, the better. And that's why, you know, your internal communications, I know that a number of you on the webinar today are, you know, run or part of an internal communications group. Yours is a crucial role right now, because people are looking to leaders, they're looking to prime ministers, they're looking to, you know, they're looking to suddenly leadership is important. You know, we've spent so many years, haven't we, saying how expertise and leadership isn't important. It's now crucial. And so how you support your leaders, how you can help them to frame a conversation, to show empathy, to listen, that's going to be absolutely crucial. So I agree. And that's actually part of the reason we've got this webinar, which I hope you can join us on the 21st of May, about leadership. And I agree about the good news. I've been a little bit sensitive about the good news, because certainly for me, being in this lovely house in Primrose Hill with my husband here all the time and my kids, one of my children hasn't been that awful. But actually, of course, for many of your employees, particularly those of them who don't have a large home and are sharing with employees, other partners, and have children, this is a terrible time. And so I think one has to be, you know, the optics, as my son would call it, the optics are really important right now. But the good news is that actually we are building organizations that are more resilient. And well-being, we know, is a massive organizational asset. So this is the time to shore up your well-being ideas. I hope that today's webinar has given you some thoughts about that. And please do continue to talk in this community about that. So certainly energy, leadership is going to be really crucial. The second point, Anna, you raised was about flexibility and adaptability. I think that this is a moment of mass experimentation. It's a petri dish. We are seeing so many people trying to do so many different things in so many new ways. And also the cost of experimentation is very low right now. You know, we don't normally run webinars which are for in general, but we are doing that at HSM, and we can see that you really appreciate it. We don't normally do a pulse survey, but we have. We hope you'll enjoy it. This is a time when every one of us is experimenting. And you know, part of the issue about building a resilient company, and I guess we've all gone back to our library. You can't see my library actually because it's behind me. But in my own library, I pulled out every single book I've got about resilience to have another look at it. And as you remember, resilience is about experimentation, learning quickly, and then scaling. And so you need now to go through that process of capturing the experiments. We've got a petri dish out there. Working out what's going to work well for you, and then scaling. And to do that, you need to be listening to people. So being flexible, being agile, being adaptive is going to be absolutely crucial. You know that creative companies have a time when they encourage employees to work on their own area of interest. This is the time to do that. You know, this is the time, and we'll be talking more about this in our next webinar when we look at collaboration and also productivity, is that we'll have an opportunity there to think about how do you encourage employees to find solutions to this, because this is not going to be a top-down process. This has to be a bottom-up process where you can listen to your employees and find out what they're doing. The telecom company we're working with right now, they've got, you know, almost 100,000 people talking to each other about what they've learned and about how they can do things differently. We all need to do that. We need very, very quickly to do mass experimentation and then to find ways of scaling quickly. Energy, yes, energy is being depleted, and that's why we chose that as one of our first areas to talk about. Lots of tactics there to encourage people to be energetic. I think the one that seems to be coming out that we spoke about is blocks of time, you know, allowing people, encouraging people to have time when they're on and time when they're off. And as a corporate, as a business, you need to be very sensitive to time off, because day 41, this isn't going, you know, another 40 days, and it's possible that some of us will have another 40 days, we're going to have to confront some of the issues that we can now see arising. That's why the survey that we're suggesting you use is so important, because that will give you real insight into what are the big issues that you have to be developing. And some of that's tough. I mean, I agree about annual leave. One of the things that we realized very early on is that if everybody moves their annual leave to October and November, when we hope everything's back to the new normal, then that's a disaster for the business. And, you know, so people have to take leave, maybe not all their annual leave, but I think, you know, all of us are trying to manage the economic viability of our business and the well-being viability of our employees. And that's a balance that we have to be incredibly sensitive to. And that's why overdoing the communication, overdoing the empathy is really going to be crucial right now. Anna, I can see we've got 3 more minutes before we close. What else is on your mind?
So just building on the points you've made around making sure that we capture the lessons learned, and also the importance of the bottom-up approach to this period of mass experimentation. So we've heard throughout the presentation and through our research on wellbeing the importance of both the individual and the organisation in enacting wellbeing, and this is also obviously true when it comes to change more generally with social change. You know, that relies on individuals changing their behaviour. And what I've noticed is that there's a lot of talk on things will not return to normal, but not so much talk on how that will happen, and how individuals themselves also have to make sure that they will change their behaviour, rather than relying on a kind of external push to push them.
I think that. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know that your view on how to convince individuals, especially with this subject, to really realise that they themselves have to use this as a time to capture lessons learned, experiments, in order to develop an approach for the future.
I think that's a great point for us to be ending on, actually, Anna. I think that's absolutely right, that it's something we said right at the beginning. Do you remember when I said it's about the individual and about the organisation? All of the research, both on job crafting and on boundary spanning, shows that the individual has to take responsibility for that. You know, individuals have to craft their own job. You can't craft it for them. Individuals have to manage their own energy. But what you can do is to give them the autonomy to do that and give them the tools and the tactics to do that. So, you know, that's going to be really important. Now, as they do that, as they craft their own jobs, and we'll be talking more about that on the 7th of May, and as they manage their own energy, they are experimenting, and both individually and in teams. Next time we meet, we're going to talk a lot more about teams, of course, because we've tended in these 2 webinars to focus on individuals, but all of us are members of teams which have to collaborate and are collaborating. So do come to the 7th of May to hear more about that. But actually, you know, learning from those experiments is absolutely crucial. You know, if you haven't got one, do use our pulse check, because what that will be doing is to identify some good practices that are already happening. My preference, as you know, always is to use a platform where people talk to each other. But you need to be capturing those experiments. This is the Petri dish that we are looking at now. Okay, I know I speak as an academic, so I love experiments and Petri dishes. It is absolutely extraordinary. You know, the way that the world is operating right now is extraordinary. You have a lot of opportunities to try things that you've never tried before, to do things you've never done before, and to scale them. And actually using this opportunity to do that would be an enormously useful way for you to spend this, what is, I know for all of us, a very, very difficult time. So on that final point, it's where our time is through. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Our job at HSM, as you know, is to support our community as much as we can. Thank you for your questions. We will, later on this afternoon, be sending you a resource pack, which includes the webinar recording from this. Of course, there's also the Virtual Families and Teams webinar, key insights that you can share with your colleagues, and a link to our COVID-19 pulse check. And we encourage you to use that to learn about our whole community. But if you're interested in your own company, also to ask us to provide individual company data if that's what you're interested in. So we'll be in touch over the next day or 2. My team are there ready to talk to you. So please pick up the phone. Let's talk more about this important topic and how we can support each other in our community. Thank you so much for joining us. And a big thank you also to my team at HSM who have made this possible. First of all, thank you to Anna. Thank you to Callie, who was behind the scenes with the polls, and thank you to Kyra, who made this amazing webinar for us. So thank you to the team, and of course to Emma and Harriet for leading us through this difficult period. Goodbye.